Welcome to Rising Phoenix Podcast. The show we dive deep into the important topics affecting our mental and emotional well-being. I'm Susan Albright.
And I'm Maddison Albright. Today we're discussing a topic that affects millions of people around the world, depression.
Depression is more than just sad feeling or going through a rough patch. It's a complex mental health condition that can impact every aspect of a person's life. According to the World Health Organization, depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, affecting more than 264 million people of all ages. Despite its prevalence, depression is often misunderstood and stigmatized.
In today's episode, we'll explore what depression really is, how it's diagnosed, and the various factors that can contribute to its development. We'll also share our personal stories and how we experience depression firsthand, discuss treatment options, and share practical tips for managing this challenging condition.
This episode will be a comprehensive overview of depression.
In future episodes, we will dive deeper into specific types of depression.
Our goal is to provide a comprehensive overview of depression, dispel common myths, and offer hope and support for those who are struggling, whether dealing with depression yourself, supporting a loved one who's dealing with depression, or just wanting to learn more. We hope this episode will be informative and enlightening.
This episode, we would like to provide a trigger warning. This episode will include discussions on sensitive topics such as depression, mental health struggles, and experiences that may be distressing to some listeners. If you find these topics triggering, we encourage you to listen with caution or feel free to skip this episode if you need to. Your well-being is important to us.
I also want to advise that this is not medical advice. Please see your provider for medical advice and treatment. Let's start by defining depression and understanding its different forms. Depression, also known as major depressive disorder, is a medical condition characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and a lack of interest or pleasure in daily activities. It's important to recognize that depression is not a sign of weakness or something that one will simply just snap out of. It's a real illness that requires understanding and appropriate treatment.
There are several types of depression, like seasonal affective disorder, which occurs at certain times of the year and affects people that have less sunshine in the winter. Postpartum depression affects new mothers, and there's also bipolar disorder, where depressive episodes alternate with periods of mania. Persistent depression disorder, which is a chronic low-grade depression called dysthymia, which lasts for at least 2 years. Unlike major depressive episodes, this type of sadness is not overwhelming, but is persistent and pervasive, affecting your daily life. It can be described as a lack of enthusiasm or a mood that's persistent, gray cloud that never lifts, feeling fatigued with low self-esteem, difficulty with concentration, and often feeling distracted with episodes of insomnia at times.
Understanding depression begins with acknowledging its symptoms. These can range from emotional signs like low-grade enthusiasm or a sense of gloom to overwhelming sadness and irritability. There can be physical symptoms like changes in low energy, widespread body aches and pains, poor sleeping patterns such as sleeping too much or too little, and a change in appetite. It can also impact cognitive function, making it hard to concentrate or make decisions. The severity and combination of these symptoms can vary greatly from person to person.
Now we're going to discuss causes and risk factors. For example, there are many biological factors that cause depression, brain chemical deficiencies, and also poor gut health. Our gut is our second brain and is responsible for a lot of our mental health. Some of it is because our genes, or genes that you were born with, to have a mutation. Those genes are the MTHFR, COMT, SLC6A4, and the BDNF. These gene mutations highlight the intricate interplay between genetics and environmental factors and the risk of developing depression. While they can predispose individuals to depression, they do not determine destiny, and various factors, including lifestyle, support systems, and therapy, can significantly influence mental health outcomes.
There are also psychological factors that play into depression, some of which can be PTSD, which is when one traumatic event happens that traumatizes the individual, or complex PTSD, which is when the individual experiences multiple traumas throughout a time period. PTSD can be an event like a car accident that was traumatizing, versus complex PTSD, which can be caused from childhood psychological, physical, sexual abuse over multiple years or decades. Individual personality traits can also be another psychological factor. One could be cognitive distortion. For example, an all or nothing thinking might view a minor mistake at work as a total failure, learned helplessness, uncontrolled, stressful events, and start to believe that nothing they do will improve their situation. And then the last would be negative self-esteem, where the individual might automatically interpret neutral or positive events in a negative light. These types of people would be similar to Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh books.
Last can be environmental factors such as chronic stress, such as a high-pressure job with long hours, traumatic life events. Again, this can tie into PTSD and social isolation or lack of support, because human beings are inherently social creatures and seek meaningful social connections for emotional well-being.
That's so true. And I feel like social media has taken a lot of the social connection away from us and isolated people. Also, the elderly who live alone are at high risk for depression due to isolation.
My example of isolation is when 2 years ago when Roe v. Wade was overturned and I had found out about it, and I really didn't do much that first week after the news that came out that Roe v. Wade was overturned, because it just felt so daunting, and just felt like there was so much weight on me, because I was like, oh my God, now something's been taken away from me and I literally can't do anything about it. So instead I just isolated. And sometimes my fiance would come home and be like, what are we doing today? And I'd be like, well, we're not doing anything today until I have basic human rights. And then we literally just wouldn't do anything because I just felt no desire to.
I think that's probably a really good example for, especially in today's age, since Roe v. Wade was overturned. We have several states that have brought in some pretty aggressive stance on women's reproductive rights, which have been in some states, one of them being Idaho, I know is a hot spot right now for that, where women literally do not have a right. And there are OBGYNs who are leaving the state because they're afraid to lose their license, even if they would go in and try to save someone who has a tubal pregnancy, and that is not a viable pregnancy. They're afraid to do surgery on these women to save them, and we're losing women because of this. That is daunting, I think, for females in the United States right now. Just the isolation of that alone has been bad. And now we're into an election year, which that alone can isolate each other, even in families. We know, we've seen that, we've experienced it ourselves in families. Even with my stance, where I consider myself more of what I call a conservative liberal, or a liberal conservative, because I really don't stand with one side or the other. I can see across that board where you have a different stance in your politics also.
Next, we're going to discuss treatment options. There's hope for individuals that suffer from depression. Let's remember that this is not something that a person will just snap out of or get over. They are not being lazy. They are dealing with complicated mental illness. The first option is therapy, such as talk therapy, group, cognitive behavioral, psychotherapy, interpersonal, psychodynamic, family therapy, humanistic, mindfulness based on cognitive, and EMDR as great therapies. Choosing the right therapy depends on the individual's needs. Also, the therapist has to be a good fit.
The next type of therapy is medication, such as an SSRI, SNRI, tricyclic antidepressants, and antipsychotics. Supplements like 5-HTP, GABA, St. John's wort, omega-3, SAMe, vitamin D3, the vitamin B family, magnesium, zinc, and L-theanine can also help support depression and can be part of a comprehensive treatment plan.
There are alternate treatments that can also help with the healing journey. Lifestyle changes, such as exercise, like walking, running, swimming, and hiking. Mindfulness, such as meditation, yoga, acupuncture, light therapy, and music therapy, spending time in nature. Mind-body techniques like Tai Chi, biofeedback are both shown to improve depression scores. Healthy eating with a balanced diet of good sources of lean protein, low carbohydrates, fruits, and veggies, limits simple sugars due to the amount of inflammation they can cause in the body, which worsens depression. Good sleep hygiene also improves depression. Most people need 8 hours of sleep, but it also needs to be Most people need 8 hours of sleep, but it also needs to be quality sleep.
So it's been no big secret. I am very vocal about the fact that I had to deal with depression for most of my life. Suicidal ideation. I've been on several different antidepressants that have been helpful at different stages. And what I'll focus on is more of some of the therapies that I've tried personally for myself that have helped. Medication has helped, but we also know through research that medication isn't the end-all cure-all. There are a lot of different things that you have to change within your lifestyle. So one that I've done this time with the depression that started about 4-ish years ago, that one I have incorporated first a therapist, and we started EMDR. And this was during COVID, so we were actually doing EMDR on Zoom, which was different, but was helpful. I found it to be extremely helpful. I thought at first it was going to be very silly, but I actually, once I relaxed and really focused, found it to be very helpful. I was also went on 2 different antidepressants before we found one that worked well for me. And then once I went from that counselor, who then was retiring, we found a new counselor for me. Then we hit it off, and she also offers EMDR. And I also incorporated acupuncture. And I never in my life would have ever went to acupuncture. But I found out about her actually through a healthcare system that I was working in. And they were talking about this acupuncturist who focuses more on PTSD, trauma, anxiety, depression. And so I'm like, what do I have to lose? So I started with her. And I still go to my acupuncture once a month, and it's a godsend. I also go to Reiki, which is energy work, and that's about every 6 weeks. I also do meditation, breathing exercises, guided meditation is another one. So we think of. Okay. Guided meditation is another avenue I tried that works well. And the breathing and the guided meditation really help to kind of bring that whole nervous system down and calm everything down. You just feel better overall. I know with me, eating a lot of carbohydrates causes a lot of issues with my body. So that causes that inflammatory process, and inflammation in the body causes more inflammation in the brain, which makes depression worse. Inflammation in the gut makes depression worse. So I went completely gluten-free because I found that was causing a lot of inflammation in my body. And then I also have cut out dairy, more so because my body hates me. Because giving up cheese was awful. But yeah, giving up dairy because it was just causing a lot of inflammation in my gut. And so finding that getting rid of those helped tremendously, and going to more of a whole foods type diet. I have to make sure that I get a lot of sleep. I actually like to sleep about 12 hours if I can. I've been like that my whole life. And so I at least try to get 8, if not more. And I've also learned as I've gotten older to take naps. I know I fought it when I was a kid, and I'm like, I don't want to take a nap. And now I'm like, I'm taking a nap. So I will allow myself to lay down and go, you know what, I'm just going to take a nap. And on days that I'm off, I'll nap, which is great. But those are all things that that I tried as far as like medications if people want to know. Zoloft was probably the first one I was on, and that was back in the 90s. That was the first one I was ever on. I've been on Celexa. I was on Wellbutrin, and then my staff told me I better get off Wellbutrin because apparently it makes me really mouthy. So then I had to switch to Celexa. And this last time I started on Zoloft, but it was, it caused so much, I lost so much cognitive like disconnect. Like I felt like a complete zombie on it, and that was on a low dose. And so we switched over to Lexapro, and that helped tremendously, kind of lifting that cognitive disconnect that I had, and at least helped me to kind of climb back out of that hole of depression and then start really helping myself to move forward. I also had, and this is where isolation comes in, I also had my family, my kids, and my 2 best friends who were standing beside me throughout the whole thing and calling and texting and, you know, making sure that I've ate. And, you know, there were times that I didn't feel like doing anything. So I would just sit and people would just sit and quiet with me. And sometimes with depression, that is helpful to know that you have those people that just will sit and quiet with you. And we were just discussing on the way down here about Eeyore, and we all had decided, you know, Eeyore was probably our favorite. And Eeyore, no matter what, and his dark, gloomy cloud that was walking with him, he was still, everybody in that group.
They always took him with them.
Exactly. They always took him with them. So every adventure they had, Eeyore was out there toting along right with them. And it made Eeyore happy to be part of that group, even though he was still very down. And Eeyore, it was just, you know, it's just good to not have that isolation, to know that you're going through it. People know you're going through it, but they're going to kind of take you on adventures anyway.
I think when I first started my depression journey, ew, I hate that. My depression journey. Here we go. That's it. Hot depression journey. What's going on today? I think I was about 12 or 13, and then I was first diagnosed with depression. So that's when I started all my antidepressant medications. And I remember the first couple of years of being diagnosed with depression when you're a teenager is like kind of weird, because not only are you starting to go through puberty, but then you're also trying all these new antidepressants, which is like a lot happening in your body all at once. So I feel like in my early years of depression, there weren't as many tools for me. It wasn't until I got into my like late 20s where I found things that like actually worked for my depression. I feel like my teen years of depression were the hardest parts of depression that I've had. And I struggled really bad in my teen years with suicidal ideation. I self-harmed. I struggled with eating disorders. So, yeah, being a teenager, getting diagnosed with depression is definitely hard. I mean, depression's hard no matter what. But I remember when I first got diagnosed, I just kind of felt kind of helpless. Like, I didn't really know what to do. And I was like, well, I'm always going to be like this. And it's never going to get any better. So I'm like, what is the point? It wasn't until I got into my later 20s where I kind of started developing like as a real person in the world and found things that brought me joy and things that I like to do. I
wonder, do you feel like part of that is because your teen years, we lived in Ohio, in a small rural town. There were not that many resources in town. I mean, most people didn't even know what EMDR was. It was never offered, let alone to find an acupuncturist. You would have to go down to Columbus or the suburbs of.
Yeah.
In that time frame. Versus we moved out here when you were 18.
17, 18.
We moved to Oregon about that time where there are more resources, even though our towns are considered small. Here, they're not as small as what our small rural towns are back east. Do you feel like that maybe part of that is a factor or change in scenery, even like the move and change of people, places, and things?
I think a little bit of both. I think when you come from a small town, like we came from a small town, there are not a lot of resources there. There's not a lot to do except go to a therapist and take a pill, which just like is not really a one-size-fits-all for anybody with depression. All depression is different. So I feel like when we moved into the city, which everyone was like, oh, this is such a small city. And we're like, this is small? We're like, this is huge. It takes like 20 minutes to get across town. Like, this is a massive city you're speaking about. So I do feel like environmental change in general, just the move, did help my depression. I feel like still I really struggle with it, especially moving like for the first time to the other side of the United States with just us, and we didn't know anybody. I feel like my 20s is really when I first started tackling depression, and like changing my diet and my eating and fighting out things that cause my body inflammation, because when my body was inflamed and my brain felt worse, I felt more sluggish and didn't really want to do anything. And it wasn't until I started like changing my diet that I was like, wow, I feel so much better. And then I was like, wow, I can't believe I was walking around all these years feeling this bad with all I had to do was just not eat bread. Like, it's literally so simple, it's stupid. Because they're like, I could have felt better
ages ago.
10 years ago had I stopped eating bread. But like, bread is pretty good, so it's kind of hard to stop eating when you first start. But I also started doing Reiki the last year and a half, which is energy work, which really helped. That was something I kind of dived into. For me, a lot of my therapy or coping mechanisms I find a lot with like nature. So I noticed times in my life that have been really bad. I could pinpoint to trips I have taken to the redwoods. So like that's where I like to go when I'm having really, really hard times and dark times, because I feel like I can really connect there, because you go out there and there's usually not many people around and you usually don't have cell phone service. So like I can isolate, but like a healthy way. I also feel like I didn't really start getting into like art until I got a little bit older, because I always thought I was like bad at it, even though art is like subjective. So it's like, you can't really be bad at art, but I would look at stuff I do and be like, that's really ugly. Why am I doing that? But then I was like, well, that's kind of fun to do. I also noticed for me, like doing stuff around this house is fun to do, like my artistic side of like decorating the house or like getting new things and like switching things up. So like change of scenery, just like in our house, also helps me deal with my depression sometimes. I know when I first started in my earlier years of depression, I know that I was journaling a lot. I went through like probably like 8 or 9 journals, just journaling all throughout my first early years of depression. I don't really journal that much anymore. I do like other stuff because I'm an adult and I can like drive out somewhere and like scream into the void. Sometimes that helps. I feel that. So, there's a lot of ways to manage depression, and it's not a one size fits all. It's a lot of trial and error of what works for you, because some things that work for you won't work for other people. But since I got diagnosed at 12 or 13 as a 27-year-old, I feel like I have actually got a handle on my depression. Another thing for me is that throughout my years of having depression, I know when my depression is really bad because my personal hygiene is the first thing to go. I won't shower. I won't brush my teeth. I know it's really gross. My breath does smell, but I'm depressed, so I really don't care if my breath smells or if I washed my hair in the past week. So when I do notice that my depression is getting really bad and my hygiene is slipping, that's when I like try to give myself a little bit of extra love and like maybe take like 2 or 3 everything showers that week, or book myself to get a facial, or book myself to go in and get my nails done or something, and I'm taking care of myself so I'm not sliding down into that lack of personal hygiene, because I know for me when it gets really bad, that's the first thing that goes. So I try to keep like a mental note of that when it starts slipping away, so I can book myself to do something to help upkeep my personal hygiene.
Next, we're going to debunk common myths about depression. Understanding these facts helps demystify depression and underscores the importance of comprehensive treatment and approaches tailored to individual needs.
Myth: depression is just sadness. Depression is a complex mental health disorder that involves persistent feelings of sadness, but also includes other symptoms such as fatigue, changes in appetite, and sleep patterns, difficulty concentrating, and a loss of interest in activities once enjoyed. It affects emotional, physical, and cognitive functioning.
The next myth is depression is a sign of weakness or character flaw. Depression is a medical condition with biological, psychological, and environmental factors. It is not a reflection of personal weakness or character flaw. Anyone can develop depression regardless of their strength or resilience.
Another myth is you can just snap out of depression. Depression is something that people will just not snap out of. It requires proper treatment, which may include therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, and support. Recovery is a gradual process.
Myth: depression only affects adults. Depression can affect people of all ages, including children and teenagers. It may manifest differently in younger population, but is equally serious and requires appropriate treatment and support.
Another myth: antidepressants are the only effective treatment for depression. While antidepressants can be very effective for many people, other treatments like psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, lifestyle changes, and alternative therapies can also be highly beneficial. A combination of treatment often works best.
Myth: if someone in your family has depression, you will too. While genetics can play a role in the risk of developing depression, it is not solely determined by family history. Environmental factors, personal experiences, and individual resilience also significantly contribute to the development of depression.
Myth. People with depression are always sad or crying. Depression can manifest in various ways. Some people may not show overt sadness, but instead experiencing irritability, numbness, or physical symptoms like fatigue and aches. They may also engage in activities or work excessively to distract themselves from their feelings.
Current research has identified various neurobiological factors associated with depression, including imbalance in neurotransmitters like serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Brain imaging studies have also shown structural and functional abnormalities in areas such as the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and amygdala.
While genetics play a role in the risk for depression, epigenetic factors, which is how genes are expressed, influenced by environmental stressors, also contribute. Research continues to explore how gene-environment interactions impact depression.
Effectiveness of combination treatments. Studies have shown that a combination of antidepressant medication and psychotherapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, is often more effective than either treatment alone. This approach addresses both the biological and the psychological aspect of depression.
Emerging research suggests a link between inflammation and depression. Elevated levels of inflammatory markers have been observed in some individuals with depression, indicating that inflammation might play a role in its development and progression.
There's also impact of lifestyle factors such as physical activity, diet, sleep. Regular exercise, a balanced diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids and antioxidants, and sufficient sleep have been shown to improve symptoms of depression.
Early intervention and treatment are crucial in improving outcomes for individuals with depression. Early treatment can prevent the progression of symptoms and reduce the risk of reoccurrence. Public awareness and reducing stigma are essential in encouraging people to seek help properly.
Psychedelic research and depression. I'm going to touch on this subject because in Oregon, which is the state that we live in, is the first state in the U.S. that's implemented a psilocybin facilitated program. Psychedelic research and how it improves mental health is an area that I research and truly have a passion for. I finished my psilocybin facilitator program and just recently obtained my certificate. Psilocybin has been used for centuries in various cultures for spiritual and healing purposes. In recent decades, scientific research has begun to explore its therapeutic potential. Clinical trials have shown that psilocybin can produce rapid and sustained reduction in depressive symptoms. For instance, a Johns Hopkins University study found that 2 doses of psilocybin combined with supportive psychotherapy led to significant improvement in depression, with many participants achieving remission. Psilocybin has shown promise in treating individuals with treatment-resistant depression. These patients often do not respond to traditional antidepressants, but psilocybin therapy has provided substantial relief in clinical trials. In some studies, psilocybin has been shown to be effective or even more effective than traditional antidepressants. In a New England Journal of Medicine article, they compared psilocybin to escitalopram, which is Lexapro, and found that psilocybin had a more significant impact in reducing depressive symptoms.
Serotonin production. Approximately 90 to 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut. While serotonin in the gut primarily regulates intestinal movements, it also influences mood, emotion, and sleep when it interacts with the brain. The gut-brain axis is a bidirectional communication network linking the gut and the brain through the nervous system, endocrine system, and immune system. The gut microbiome can influence brain function and behavior. Dysbiosis, imbalance in the gut microbiome, has been linked to mental health disorders, including depression.
We've had so much research and so much movement forward in mental health realm, but we still have so much to do to improve mental health in the U.S. and worldwide.
Remember, if you deal with depression and have any feelings of self-harm, please reach out to a loved one, neighbor, and call or text Suicide Hotline and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And there are support people that can talk to you and help you get the resources that you need.
Thank you for joining us today as we explored the complex and deeply personal topic of depression. Remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with depression, it is important to reach out for help. There are numerous treatments and resources available, from traditional therapies and medications to emerging treatments like psychedelics, which show promising results. No one should have to face this journey alone. Stay connected, stay hopeful, and take care of your mental health.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.